The first person to be prosecuted in Hong Kong under the new national security law has appeared in court and been denied bail. The charges against Tong Yin Kit include terrorist activities. He's accused of driving a motorbike into police. In London, China's ambassador attacked Britain for its criticism of China and its offer of a path to UK citizenship for 3 million residents of Hong Kong.
These moves constitute a gross interference in China's internal affairs, attempts to disrupt or obstruct the implementation of the national security law for Hong Kong SAR will be met with the strong opposition of 1.4 billion Chinese people. All these attempts are doomed to failure.
New police powers were announced in Hong Kong, allowing searches without warrant, the freezing and confiscating of assets, and requiring overseas organisations to reveal their assets, spending and income. A charm-offensive trip to Hong Kong as London mayor. Like so many before him, Boris Johnson was chasing Chinese investors. But the Chinese ambassador warned the investment tap could be switched off if Boris Johnson goes ahead with his expected decision to exclude the Chinese technology giant Huawei from Britain's 5G network. What are the consequences for Britain if Huawei is removed from 5G here?
The consequences, there might be many. In the past 5 years, the Chinese business in UK is bigger than the Chinese investment in the previous 30 years. Because Chinese business people believe UK is more business friendly. They can do business here. But when you get rid of Huawei, it sent out a very wrong message. It punished the British image.
The ambassador suggested America was dictating British policy.
I always say Britain can only be great when they can have their independent foreign policy. If you do not have an independent policy, you have to dance to the tune of the other countries. How could you claim to be a great Britain? Thirdly, I think it also sent out a very bad message to China business community here. They're all watching. They're watching how you handle Huawei. You know, that will be, if you get rid of Huawei, it sent out a very bad message for other Chinese businesses.
The UK should not be in any way vulnerable to high-risk state vendors. So we'll have to think carefully about how we handle that.
The Prime Minister now has to worry not only about how he delivers on an election promise to get superfast broadband rolled out nationwide by the next election, but also how he deals with the possible investment backlash from China.
China has stepped up its diplomatic assault on Australia.
Australia recently felt the lash of Beijing's anger after demanding an international investigation into the causes of COVID-19. Does their experience point to what Britain could be in for?
It ramped up its cyber attacks against government and private industry. It began a propaganda campaign within China to warn Chinese people not to visit Australia. Those industries or sectors in Britain that are particularly vulnerable to trade embargoes or indeed to cyber attacks should perhaps start putting in place protections.
When Chinese investment pouring into the UK and London, have you ever raised human rights at all?
It's not.
A chapter of warmer relations which reached its peak when Boris Johnson was London mayor and George Osborne and David Cameron reigned in Downing Street is coming to a close.
If you want to make China a hostile country, you have to bear the consequences.
Regarding the heated topic of 5G, Huawei has invested more than $4 billion since 2009, which is higher than the combined 5G investment by major equipment vendors in Europe and the US.
China's poured funding into research and development the West hasn't matched. Nigel Inkster believes a global technology race is beginning, and China could just win it.
Faced with the determination, the focus and the resources that the Chinese party state is bringing to bear, I would certainly argue for a rethink on whether the West can carry on as we are or whether we do actually need to move to more deliberate industrial strategies.
It's not just about masts on office blocks in London. This is a much bigger chapter opening.
This is a huge geopolitical inflection point. Huge. And I think that our policymakers in the Western liberal democracies have been very slow to appreciate just how consequential it is.
The government's announcement on Huawei is expected this month. It could come with a very big price tag if China's rhetoric is matched by its actions.
And as you've just heard, inside Hong Kong, it's been announced that Beijing will be claiming extra powers under the new security law starting tomorrow. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman is outside the Foreign Office in London and has more.
John, I think one of the most worrying details of this new security law is the fact that the police will be able to search a property without a warrant, and more worryingly still, that they will be able to stop Hong Kong Chinese from leaving the former colony if they are under investigation, which begs the big question. If the UK is offering a pathway to citizenship for 3 million Hong Kong Chinese, maybe the most active campaigners inside Hong Kong will simply not be able to take advantage of that. The other question, I think, is this. Is Boris Johnson about to change his mind? I think in the last week, the political temperature has changed considerably. The security calculation over Huawei's involvement in 5G probably hasn't changed at all, but the political calculation has. And when you have a former head of MI6 writing that he doesn't think Huawei should be involved in the UK's 5G network, you can see which way the wind is blowing.
Jonathan Rugman. Well, now, earlier I spoke to the pro-democracy activist and former Hong Kong lawmaker Nathan Law. He has previously served time in prison for his role in protests in Hong Kong. And after China imposed the sweeping controversial security law last week, he fled the city. I began by asking if he thinks he will ever return to Hong Kong.
I hope one day that when Hong Kong is free again, I could go back.
But that one day does feel a terribly long way off.
Yes, of course. The short-term future may seem so bleak for Hong Kong, but I believe that in the long-term future, with the global effort, I think there will be democracy and freedom in Hong Kong.
But we don't sort of hear much from the United Nations. We don't seem to have much coming out of the United States, which is often a leader in these things. Aren't you a bit worried that actually the world is going to let this just happen?
Well, of course, for now, China seems so powerful. But I think structurally, there has been a great change from appeasing China to a more assertive attitude.
Of course, the way the Chinese see it was expressed by the British, the Chinese ambassador to Britain, who called it a gross interference.
I think the crux is not interfering in internal issues, but to hold China accountable to the global society and Hong Kong.
Do you think Britain was foolish ever to believe that the Chinese would honour this agreement? They've always wanted this, and they have the power to do what they've done, and they've done it.
Well, for the past decades, there have been so much wishful thinking towards China. It's not only a situation in UK, but in the US, there has always been a rhetoric saying that, China will open up itself, will be democratized. But the truth is, these all went wrong. So from now on, I think we need to understand that without global coherent multilateral pressure, China will always be authoritarian and expand its influence overseas. So I think for now, we need a more firm and assertive attitude towards it.
Are your friends and family particularly concerned today about their own safety, given the new laws that the Chinese have announced?
They are definitely on the radar of the government. And of course, I'm so worried about their own safety. And also my families, my friends, if you are learning from the experience in China, that these people could be prosecuted or could be reprehended just because they are targeting me. So I'm really worried, but I hope that the international community could stay focused, paying attention on Hong Kong in order to apply pressure and stop the government from doing the really worst thing.